welcome to For the Record. Tonight we speak with the Minister for Lands and Mineral Resources, Mr. Ashnil Sudhakar. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
So it's your first, you're serving your first term within the cabinet as Lands Minister, and arguably one of the most controversial ministries. How's your first term been so far?
It's been pretty interesting. I mean, it's just 4 months, just over 4 months in my first term, and because I had extensively practiced in lands as a lawyer, as a barrister previously, so it was easy to gel into the system. But as you know, as you mentioned, it's a very challenging ministry. I won't call it controversial, but it turns controversial at times, because land, as you know, is a resource. It's a very sought after resource, and my ministry looks after lands and minerals as well, which makes it a more sought after ministry, I would say. And people usually, as you know, the judges would know, people fight over every square inch of land.
Right.
So there's a challenge that everybody wants land, and everybody wants to have a stake in land, and there's scarce resources.
Tell us about some of the things that you picked up on, maybe a few legacy issues that you decided that you were going to look deeper into.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting point, because when I came in and I looked through all the files and all the processes, some of the things I found out is that there's a very, I would say, a large majority of people have very little regard for the law. And it's not only in lands but other sections as well, where you explain to them a process and you tell them that this is the process, this is the law, and nobody wants to hear that. People just want their way, they want their aims to be achieved. And some of these things are, I mean, we tell people that it's a particular use, the land is of particular use. There's 5 types of land in Fiji. That is industrial, residential, commercial, agriculture, and special use. So if it's a particular zone, you must use that for that particular purpose. If it's agricultural land, use for agriculture. But people cross the boundaries, they go and build houses in agricultural land, build factories without permission, and then it takes a lot of effort to reverse that or to regularize that.
So when you spoke about people not using the land for its proper use, I'm guessing you were referring to something that you released to the media a few days ago, saying that people are breaching Crown land leases. It was costing the government money as well.
Yes.
And that is people obtaining, for example, agricultural leases and not using the land for what was intended.
Yes, I mean, it would be really worthwhile for the people to understand that the zonings of this country, the way it's been done by the government, is for particular purpose. So, for instance, if you build a temple or for any place of worship inside a residential zone, where there's different people of different religions live, and some people pray very quietly, some people pray in a noisy way. So it's obviously disturbing some people. So that's why in special use we have places where we can do that in other areas. You can't start a factory or a motor garage in a residential zone. You can't just build a lot of residential flats in agricultural land, because agriculture is for a specific purpose, and sometimes agricultural land is at a special area where it's sometimes waterlogged for rice farming. Sometimes there's drainage there. If you build a house there, it will be flooded all the time. So these zones were created for special purpose, to safeguard that the respective areas or the use of it. Once you cross the use, you're breaking the law, one, and two, you're actually changing the whole topography of that land, and you're actually walking into a problem. You might walk into a very rocky land that is designed for a grazing area, and you build a house there, and you can't have a well or a water source there.
So how do you regulate that, and how do you go about enforcing the law?
See, all the leases we issue, as the 5 zones I've mentioned, all the leases we issue, there's certain conditions there that the land is to be used for this particular purpose. It should not be dealt with. You should not. The second condition on the first page of any lease is any dealing. If you want to even get somebody to work on your farm as a laborer, or any other dealing, any sort of change to the use of the land, etc., has to be consented to by the Lands Ministry, by Director for Lands. So the conditions are there, and we have monitoring teams who go out on a regular basis, or who are supposed to go out on a regular basis, to check whether we don't have houses or factories being built in the middle of farms, or somebody has opened a shop or a nightclub in the residential area. So all these conditions are there. And how we ensure is that if somebody reports to us, or we on our own accord go and inspect the land, and we find that there's a breach, and then we issue notices, and it could lead up to all the way up to cancellation of that lease.
So that would mean that you do, to some extent, greatly rely on a basis of trust with the general public and for those who are lessees.
Yes.
Do you happen to liaise with also local governments or probably councils to sort of make sure that it's being properly monitored?
Yes, I mean, you're right on that. I mean, I probably say that there's been probably a lack of coordination, but now we are improving on that. I usually discuss with the respective ministries, say Ministry for Agriculture, Department of Town and Country Planning, Ministry for Housing, that if a particular land has been given for use, and if the person has proposed a rezoning, the plan goes to Ministry for Housing. So they should ask us whether this land is of particular purpose, and usually they do. So it's a related joint effort. The Ministry for Housing will not issue them permission to build unless the land zone is clarified by us. And likewise, Ministry for Agriculture. Somebody applies for a grant, they will not give it for a residential lot, they knowing that it's not for agriculture. So now there's greater coordination between ministries to ensure that the character of the land is preserved, the use is preserved.
Have you found evidence of any such breaches? For example, something that may have happened in the past, overlooked by the authorities, for example, agricultural leases, and they were again subdivided again into housing?
Yeah, we have found, I mean, there's a recent case, I mean, in places like Nandi and other places too, where there's a lot of demand for houses. You can drive on a road and you see there's a cane farm. In the middle of the cane farm, there'll be a house coming up. And it's a blatant disregard for the law. As I said, that there seems to be a tendency, some for people lean towards the unlawful side because there's a lack of respect for the conditions, lease conditions and law. So we have had instances where we'll have shops built in a residential area, or houses coming up in agriculture zone. So that actually diminishes the arable land that is available for agriculture. In fact, I was reading an article lately that India and China have reversed a lot of usage, and they're planting more. And it's actually showing from the NASA pictures, those countries are becoming greener. So this is something that we should be very particular about. If a land is for agriculture, we must plant on that. If we don't plant on that, then we are going to have the food security. It's one of our commitments under COP23 that we must have food security. If we keep on building buildings, how do we feed the people inside those buildings?
We'll have more for you right after the break.
Picking up from where we left off in the previous segment about agriculture, you had mentioned that your ministry is currently trying to work with other ministries and other departments. Let's look at something that a lot of people have actually started to use as an excuse not to get into agricultural farming, saying that leases are not being renewed and they're finding it a little too difficult to actually obtain a renewal of a lease. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can explain to you in detail. The first thing we are doing is we're going out, sending teams out to look at non-cultivation and under-cultivation. We have a number of leases out there in almost all sectors where people have obtained agricultural leases and they're not using it. They're probably letting it lying idle, using it for grazing land or building houses. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of the renewal of the leases, when you look at that, there are many aspects that we have to check before we renew. So if you have taken an agricultural lease, and you haven't planted, you have left it uncultivated. When you come to us to renew, we see that there's unpaid rent money, unpaid lease money, and unutilized land. You haven't used the land for the purpose. So there's breach of conditions, automatic breach of conditions. So that's the biggest hindrance we have found in renewal. The straightforward leases where you have done your part, you're up to date with your rentals, you have used the land for the purpose, you haven't subdivided illegally, you lodge the renewal application, you get it immediately. The ones that are held up are these ones where you don't know what the land was being used for, and then we have the legal problems too, especially the administration and the probate issues, where people have passed on they haven't made a will, they haven't they haven't appointed trustees. So the land is there, there's people there, we don't know who they are. The owners have passed on or migrated, they have made no arrangements, they have made no will. So when somebody comes to us to renew, we have to first check whether this person is supposed to be the rightful person, or somebody just came on the land at the 11th hour and asking for renewal. So these are some of the aspects that are holding up renewals.
And this especially becomes relevant to the sugar industry as well.
Yes.
So this is in fact one of the focuses of your ministry, to help revive the sugar industry.
Yes.
And that's in relation to leases.
Yes, we had a lot of discussion with the Sugar Ministry. I was part of the consultations too. That and Sugar Ministry, FSC especially, they want to plant, they want cane to process in their mills. And the Ministry for Sugar, they also want cane to be planted. We want the production to go up. As you know, that at some stage we were producing 4.3 million tons of cane. It's now dropped to 1.7 million, less than half. And a lot of politicians saying that the production is going down and cultivation is not, cane is cultivated at a lower rate. But nobody is coming up with genuine ideas. So what we are doing is that we are identifying the good land that is arable land suitable for planting of cane, and giving it back to the people who want to plant. There's no use in, as I said earlier, holding on to a lease and not doing anything with it. You might be paying your rental on time, but there's other lease conditions. In fact, this is important to note that any agricultural lease that we have issued, there's a condition that within 2 years, of taking up that lease, your land should be under 50% cultivation, and within 4 years, you should be under 75% cultivation, and as long as the lease remains, until the term of the lease, you should be under 75% cultivation. So people have taken land and they're not planting it, they're already in breach. And that is causing damage to the sugar industry and to all the other agriculture sector.
So it's quite a drastic reduction, in fact, in the cultivation of sugarcane. Is that the only reason?
The majority of the cane leases were with the Ethiopia Land Trust Board, and you must have seen that between 1997, when the first round of ELTA leases started expiring, 96 to about 2006. A lot of cane leases were not renewed, and that actually caused a lot of people to move from the northern division to Suva, and from western division to other places. That saw the biggest reduction in the sugar sector was between 96 and 2006. But after 2006, when the Prime Minister came in, there was an effort by the government to renew the leases, and that has actually borne some fruits. We have seen about 85% of leases being renewed. That is talking about the Ethiopia land, Ethiopia leases. Same thing was done with the Crown leases, the state leases, where there were impediments in renewing. For example, you couldn't identify the rightful people. But we are trying to now, through legal aid as well, assistance of legal aid, trying to sort the legal issues out. Sort the family problems, in family fighting. So all that combined is now getting more land available for leasing and planting.
10 years down the line, would you say that the sugar industry will be stronger than what it is?
Oh, it's already on the way up. So 10 years down the line, I'm thinking, not 10 years, within 5 years we should be hitting a good cultivation rate now. Because FSC, as you know, the government through FSC is giving $800 per acre if you want to plant cane. So that's reviving the industry.
Is there anything that the ministry is currently doing or possibly might undertake to probably create more awareness on what's happening with land issues, so that those who are in doubt may not necessarily, be left hanging on the line
because
anymore?
to a lot of farmers, security is very important.
Very important, yes. For the state land, I can speak on behalf of the state land. What we are doing is, when we prepare leases, we give the copy of the leases to the prospective lessors, to leases, to take it down to a lawyer for signing. So they are ready and explain the condition. So from the word go, they know what they are supposed to do. Then we are sending monitoring teams to look at the usage of the land. If there's any breach or if there's under cultivation, non-cultivation, there's a process of issuing notices to put them on notice and to alert them that, look, you are breaching these sections, please rectify it, and they have a chance to rectify. For agriculture research, the 3-month period If a notice is issued, within 3 months you can get your ex together. So it's not a very, we won't say we are there to take your land or capture your land. It's to encourage you to use it for the purpose. So we have our policing teams, we call it, monitoring and evaluation team, our surveyors and our valuers. They go and do regular inspections now.
We'll have more for you right after the break. Mr. Sudhakar, let's get an update on one of the most, I think, important issues or highly debated issues within your term. In fact, you were catapulted into this issue, the land exchange between India and Fiji.
Yeah.
So a lot has been said about that, but we'd like to, get a fuller picture from you.
See, as you know, the objection period has ended, and the Ministry for Local Government, they are assessing all the objections. That's their part. I do not intend to interfere with in their territory. They have all the freedom to assess all the objections and reach a decision. The Ministry for Lands comes in when they have done their part and submit a report to us to issue a lease. But suffice to say that, as I've said previously, that we had a thorough research and had a look at everything. This land is state land, government's land, and the Indian government is giving Fiji a land in Chanakapur in India, New Delhi. It's a very valuable piece of land to build our embassy, and that land is worth close to 55 million US dollars. And in exchange of that, they have applied for a particular piece of land, which is known as the Botanical Gardens, but it doesn't fall in the Botanical Gardens. It's very close to the British High Commissioner's residence. So it's a piece of state land, and obviously people have a right to raise objections, and they have done that. And the Ministry of Local Government is handling the objections part.
There's quite a lot of misconception going around about the value of the land in India, saying that why is it that we get a piece of land that is valued at such a high amount, and then we are giving away something that, well, pardon my saying so, may not be of equal or same value.
See, I mean, we did have a discussion around that area as well. If you look at the size of the Indian subcontinent, they've got large piece of land available. Compared that to Fiji, Fiji is a small country. Land is very scarce here, as you know. And India doesn't just give land like that to any country. In fact, Fiji is probably the only country who's able to acquire land there. It is, after Fiji, I don't think anybody else has got it. And it's because of long diplomatic relations, long and very healthy diplomatic relations Fiji has with India. And it dates back to 100 years, more than 100 years. And because of that diplomatic relations, there's this exchange that's taking place, or that's supposed to take place. Also, suffice to say that when a country like Fiji, which is not a huge economic power, for us to purchase a piece of such land in India, I mean, it will be hard on us to get a budget of $55 million to purchase a piece of land. So this kind of exchanges happens between all countries. I mean, we have land in other countries as well, which we have purchased or which have been given to us. But in this particular case, India has been very generous, and as you mentioned correctly, and some people are also saying that probably India should get a more valuable land, land of higher value from us.
That's certainly what Indians were saying. A few months before the controversy here in Fiji, there was a huge issue in India as well, where their own people were complaining against the Indian government, saying, perhaps we shouldn't be giving such a important piece of land to Fijians.
And that actually shows Fiji's position on the global stage. If a country, largest democracy in the world, and a subcontinent of India, is giving such a valuable piece of land, that shows how much they value Fiji, how much they value Fiji's diplomatic relations with them.
Let's look at something closer to home. There was, you spoke out recently about leases owing rentals amounting to $25 million. Now, of course, that's not chump change. That is quite a considerable amount. Any reasons that you could give as to why it sort of snowballed into such a large amount?
See, what we have found out and through our files is that some people, as I said, take up leases, and they do not use the land. So if they're planting on it, then if they're planting sugar, for example, FSC will deduct that lease, the rent from the sugar money and give it to Lands Department directly. But if the land is lying idle, there's no income, so nobody pays. And then everybody should be cautious about this, that there's a 12% interest charged on any unpaid rent on the invoice that is issued to you. So over years, if you haven't paid your, say if a piece of land is $450 per year on rental, you don't pay it for 10 years, you're already on 4,500 in arrears. But it's also compounding interest on that. So at the end of every year, you'll have a 12% interest number on that. So that's only talking about one piece of land. Then we have estate issues where some people, as I've said, passed on, and nobody knows who's supposed to be there, nobody knows who's supposed to pay the rent. So it keeps on accumulating unless the lease expires and somebody comes to us for renewal and say, this your arrears here, please clear it before you can renew your leases.
Let's look at another aspect of your job. Not only do you look after lands, but you're also responsible for mineral resources.
Yes.
Off camera, you had mentioned that you are actually going out on the ground to carry out works and inspect what is happening in certain areas, especially in the mining division.
Yes.
Tell us more about that.
Yes, I mean, as you've already pointed out, that mineral resources also falls under me. So what I do is I go out myself with my team to look at the respective quarries, the respective mines, all the mining activities taking place. And just last week I went down the shaft of Vatakola gold mines. It's about 1 kilometer down and 2 kilometers inland. That's about the 15th level or 18th level, very deep. And I see how our own people who are working down the mine, what sort of conditions they face. It's very damp and dark and hot conditions down there. And I just wanted to appreciate the good work that the miners are doing, and the companies that have invested in mining. As I said, it takes about 7,000 tons of rocks to produce a few kilograms of, few ounces of, over 18 ounces of gold. So it's a lot of hard work there, a lot of investment goes in there, a lot of people are employed there. Also same for quarries, river gravel. I go on foot sometimes, wade through the river and inspect those places, just to have a feel of what industries are running and how people are managing.
Have you picked out any issues that maybe those in those divisions, people who work there on the ground are facing, and maybe challenges that the ministry could help improve?
I spoke to some of the miners down there at the 18th level at VGML, and they were quite happy to be there. It's of course, it's a hard labor-oriented work. A lot of investment has gone down there. But nobody has actually pointed out any safety issues. In fact, I was told that from the record that probably Fiji's mining records, safety records, are better than a lot of other countries with the type of work they do.
We'll have more for you right after the break. Mr. Sudhakar, when we left off in the last segment, we were speaking about mineral resources. There's some issue about gravel extraction from rivers and streams in Fiji.
Yes, I mean, this is something that the people should be aware of, that even if a river or a stream runs through your personal freehold land or Ethokay land or crown land, state land, all rivers and streams and the minerals there belongs to the government. It belongs to the people through the government. So if you want to extract any gravel, you must have your proper license to operate. We have had instances, and we still have a problem where people just go into a river with the excavator and truck and start extracting gravel and start selling it off, because there's a demand with all the roads coming up and all the buildings coming up, but there's proper channels to follow. So if you want to extract gravel, please come to us as the Lands Department, and we have to do environment impact assessment as well, and then we issue license after all the requirements are completed, so that people just don't start to go and dig the gravel, and it might cause the river banks to collapse if it's not done properly, and which is a cause of flooding and soil erosion.
So to combat this, what is the ministry doing, or what will the ministry be doing to sort of stop people from going out there and doing these sort of activities illegally?
Yes, we have a policing team now, gravel inspectors in all divisions. We have supplied them with vehicles, so when there's a complaint or even on regular basis, they go and check if somebody is doing any illegal extraction, and then we issue them notices, and they can be charged for theft. is state property, because the we should also understand that all the royalties that we extract from this, a part of it goes to the landowners, the people. So if you're extracting it illegally, the landowners also lose out, and the government ensures that the landowners get their respective royalties.
While we're on the subject, Geraldine, let's talk about the Malolo Island project. Can you give us an update on what's happening there?
See, what's happening there is the matter is before the courts again. There's a civil case going on, and there's also a criminal matter pursued by the Director of Public Prosecutions against Malolo for breach of certain laws. So we'll leave the legal part to the courts. But generally, what had happened was that when we found out that the Malolo development was continuing working on state property, that is anything that's on the foreshore, the mangroves, the beaches, the seabed, it's all state property. So we issued them stop work notices, and they obviously did not adhere to those. So we have I've sent an inspection team out there a few times to have a look, and we found there to be some breaches, and that matter is before the court actually at the moment. But suffice to say, and I must tell the people as well, they should be aware that you might own the dry land, you might have your leases for the dry land, might be freehold or Ethiopia land, state land, but from the high water mark, everything after that belongs to the state. It belongs to the people actually through the state. So if there's mangrove there, there's beaches, the seabed, or there's any island there just outside that, it's all controlled by the Director for Lands, Ministry for Lands, through the Director for Lands. So for any development there, you will have to have a proper lease. It's called a foreshore lease. If you don't have a foreshore lease, then any development there would be illegal, and you can be liable for a lot of penalties and civil suits as well. So I encourage people who wish to develop, please come to us, discuss with us, and there's no problems in giving leases if you have complied with all the laws.
Let's quickly sort of just clarify a few things. There's some who sort of do not recognize the ministry as pretty much, for lesser a term, the absolute power when it comes to actually giving out the consent on use of land on certain things. You have instances where people walk up to a landowner and sort of give some sort of a presentation, as in some cases, and they want to use it for agricultural, industrial, or whatever purposes. What do you do in instances like that?
I mean, that's what I said from the start, that there seems to be a lot of leaning towards not following the law, and the law is there. The State Lands Act is clear on that. If it is a river, a foreshore, it's government property, state property. It's people's property, as I said, it's administered by the government. And if people approach the landowners indirectly by passing the government and saying that we want to use it for a particular purpose, it usually happens on the Ethiopia land. The custodians of Ethiopia land is the ITLTB, Ethiopia Trust Board. But when people go into arrangements with landowners and say that we can also develop on the foreshore, that's illegal, full stop, because the law doesn't allow you to develop on foreshore, on river banks, on any water courses, remove mangroves, etc., without a state permission. And why it's done that way is to save the environment, to save the land, save the country. If, for example, if I'm a landowner who owns adjacent land to the sea, and if I receive gifts, and as you mentioned, right, some developers do that. They approach the landowners, give them outboard motors, boats, and then remove all the mangroves. But if you continue to do that, where will all our crabs breed? Well, where will the marine life survive? So we are the custodians. We control this so that there's sustainable use of these resources, so that we don't end up like a desert in a few years' time.
Are there any processes or frameworks in place to have the landowners more included in all of these processes? Like, for example, one of these issues with consultation especially is with the hydro dam project in the Mosi, where there was, you could clearly see a divide between the information that the landowners had and what the TLTB was saying. You know, on one hand, the TLTB was saying they had 41 consultations, and the landowners were saying something completely else, that they were not happy with the way they were represented. So let's talk about these consultation processes.
Generally, the law is like when we, as a state, as the custodians of state land, when we want to use the land for some purpose, we hold proper consultations. We go there, we give them notice of meeting, we go through the provincial councils, we go through Ministry of Ethiopian Affairs, Ethiopian Land and Fisheries Commission. We get them all together, we talk to them, we explain to them in full detail of what the proposal is. Likewise, for the Namosi project that you mentioned, I think that's handled by Ethiopian Land Trust Board, because it's Ethiopian Land. But the issue there is that all the stakeholders, the provincial councils, the Ethiopian Land and Fisheries Commission, ITL, TB, State, Crown Land, Lands Department, we all come together and to explain to them. What happens is sometimes, for example, it happens, I think, in most cases, you hold a meeting, the majority, not everybody will attend. So majority of the crowd will attend, they will benefit from the knowledge, and then there's a small minority who didn't turn up, probably they were shopping, or they didn't bother turning up. Then they come and start saying that, oh, we were not there, we were not consulted. But the fact is, we go by the list provided to us by the Ethiopian Affairs Board, Land Fisheries Commission. This is the Matangali, these are the number of members. We go through it, we go through the whole list, and proper attendances are taken, and the notification period is all done. We'll never get 100% attendance to any meeting, even a small village meeting or a small, probably a temple meeting, you won't get 100% attendance. So the onus is on the people to attend these meetings and learn what we're going to do. And a lot of these projects are being held up because people say there's no consultations, but our records show that these dates the consultations were held and these many people attended.
We'll have more for you in the final segment. Welcome back. Mr. Sudhakar, let's talk about some upcoming projects of the Ministry of Lands. Budget consultations are going on, and you'll be making your submissions as well. So you must have some projects in mind, or the ministry must have.
Well, as far as the budget is concerned, unless it's announced, or unless I mean, what we present to the Ministry of Economy is something of of confidential nature. But there have been previously, we have been working on projects in the previous budget, like digitization or putting electronic versions, electronic forms of lease files, and having a database, electronic control database. So that part is well underway. There's some work done on that. I won't say it's all perfect and all completed, but there are some things that we are doing to make land files, leases more accessible to public. I do also appreciate that as we do this, there's a lot of movement too. Land leases are being transferred, mortgages are being registered, so there's a lot of movement while doing it. It's not like we can put cones around a particular road and say we're going to seal this so nobody enters. With lands, you could be working on a file and there's numerous consents, caveat applications being applied all the time. So that's one of the impediments, but that's going on. The other thing we're going to do as a groundwork is beef up our monitoring and evaluation teams, so that in the first segment we raise issues about breaches of lease conditions, use of land, because if you do a calculation, if somebody is paying $1,000 in rent a year, every day you're losing about $2.75 of income by delaying renewal. So you want this to happen very quickly so that the revenue generated from it can be used to put to greater use, and some of those things could be for electronic file management.
Apart from that, any possible reforms that the ministry is looking into to sort of streamline the services along with other ministries?
At the moment, we, as I said, we correlate with all the other ministries very well. There's open communication. As far as streamlining is concerned, the policies and the law is there. It's a lot of law is there for management of land. There's a lot of policies, a lot of written volumes, documents, standing operating procedures. Is adherence to it. It's how it's enforced and how people adhere to it. That's probably a challenge, and we are working on it. This time I'm doing it. I mean, I'm monitoring a lot of things personally to see that the complaints that people have. I mean, I receive calls all the time from people that this thing is not happening, this is stuck there. So I'm trying to remove all the blockages and making it a quicker response time.
Just a suggestion, one thing that could possibly happen is not everyone is well versed with the law and the jargons there, so to
Yes.
sort of decipher it and to understand it may be a bit of a challenge, especially like you mentioned, you've got leases out there. That's quite a dense agreement,
Yeah,
and even
yeah.
if you have lawyers out there, to actually get the average Joe to understand the conditions set there, maybe the ministry could liaise with legal departments or someone in that particular field.
Yeah, I mean the first part of that is like the discussion we're having today. People have a lot of chance to learn a lot of it in simple language, that what they're supposed to do. And then we have the Legal Aid Commission. In fact, as the Attorney General announced today, it's probably the largest law firm employing the most lawyers around the country. We are opening new offices around the country. So this is free service. People who have difficulty in understanding the lease conditions, they can approach Legal Aid Council, go to them, and their duty solicitors, they can explain to them what the leases are. And I encourage all my fellow legal practitioners, do some work pro bono. Please, if you see that it's not all about money, if people want your help, I do it all the time. I'm a lawyer myself. I sometimes drive around and people bring their leases to me in my car and I read and explain to them. So please do that. I mean, it's good public service if you help people that way. Share your knowledge.
Mr. Sudhakar, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It was a pleasure having you here and we hope to have you back.
Thank you very much. Yes.
That's all we have for you on the show tonight. We'll see you next week. Good evening.